responding since day one as much as conditions allowed. In coordination with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, the United Nations and humanitarian partners have dispatched so far 12 aid convoys to date, delivering a broad range of life-saving assistance. Over 300,000 people are currently being reached each month with some form of humanitarian aid. Much more is still needed. While humanitarian aid is critical, restoring full commercial access and reopening trade routes is crucial. We appreciate the Syrian government for its support and facilitation of the mission. We also appreciate the facilitation of humanitarian access, which will allow us to scale up our response. We call on donors to step up their support to allow humanitarian partners to respond in an adequate manner. Unfortunately, the humanitarian response in Syria remains severely underfunded, getting only 13% of the $3.2 billion needed for 2025. The UN remains committed to ensuring the sustained and principled delivery of humanitarian assistance to all communities in need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Jens, you want to add? No? Okay, so let's open now the floor to questions. I'm looking at the journalist. Is there a hand there? No? In the room? I keep having, yeah, Boris Engelson.
Yes, sorry, very childish question. How do you compare that situation in Syria with the situation in Gaza?
Sir, we answer questions one by one, so if you want to answer our journalist here.
The magnitude of the needs in Gaza is obviously much bigger than it is in Syria. But this is a crisis that is more recent, while the Gaza one is more protracted. But human needs everywhere humanitarian needs everywhere need to be addressed and responded to, because these are people's lives that are at stake.
Thank you very much. Any other question in the room or online? Let me look at the platform. So I don't see any other question to you, sir. Thank you so very much for spotlighting this incredibly difficult situation. Thanks for being with us and briefing the journalists here in Geneva. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll now ask Jeremy Lawrence to come to the podium. We will continue with OHCHR. Jeremy, you have two items on your list. One is Sudan. Maybe you want to start with that?
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. Yes, good morning, everyone. Brutal attacks by the Rapid Support Forces on the besieged city of El Fasher and the adjoining Abu Shouk camp for displaced persons in North Darfur, Sudan, resulted in the killing of at least 89 civilians over a 10-day period up until the 20th of August. We fear the actual number of civilians killed is likely higher. In the latest attacks documented by our office between the 16th and the 20th of August, at least 32 civilians were killed. At least 57 civilians were killed in previous attacks on the 11th of August. Such attacks are unacceptable and must cease immediately. We are particularly horrified that among the most recent spate of civilian killings 16 appear to have been cases of summary executions. Most of the victims were killed in Abu Shuk camp and belonged to the African Zagawi tribe, according to information gathered by our office. In another case, in the Al Fasher area, a victim was asked which tribe he belonged to. He was killed after responding that he was from the African Berti tribe. This pattern of attacks on civilians and willful killings, which are serious violations of international humanitarian law, deepens our concerns about ethnically motivated violence. We have also received disturbing reports from the ground that during attacks on the 16th of August, at least 40 internally displaced men were abducted. Their whereabouts remain unknown. The humanitarian situation in Al Fasher has reached a critical point after more than a year of siege. There is a growing risk of famine in both the city and other areas of North Darfur. In this context, we are appalled by accounts that those trying to deliver much-needed aid have once again come under attack. On the 20th of August, a humanitarian convoy consisting of 16 trucks carrying essential food supplies was hit by aerial strikes in Melit in North Darfur. This incident follows a previous attack on a UN humanitarian convoy in Al Khoma, North Darfur, on the 2nd of June. Humanitarian assistance and workers are protected explicitly under international humanitarian law and must not be targeted. Attacks on humanitarian efforts only worsens the human rights situation for civilians. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk calls on all parties to the conflict to take concrete measures immediately to ensure the protection of all civilians, including safe passage for those wishing to leave conflict-affected areas and to facilitate unimpeded humanitarian assistance for those in need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that from home you don't see the problems we have with the screens, but sorry for that. So I'll open now the floor to questions. Sudan is so important, and we really need to keep it in the light. So any question on this particular situation in the room? I don't see any hands up. Let me see. Let me go. Yeah, Boris, please.
Sorry, I only can again ask a very childish question. Don't misunderstand me. I am, as everyone, appalled with what happens in Gaza, but I am surprised by the difference in rhetorics, in narrative, both from the civil society or occasionally from UN agencies, when it comes to Gaza and when it's about other humanitarian disasters. How do you explain or justify or perceive this? It's a real issue for those listening, for journalists who want to be fair and cover equally comparable horrors.
Yes. First of all, I wouldn't be here to speak on behalf of civil society, but when it comes to messages from not only our office, but the UN at large, we are quite emphatic. It's when it comes to human rights, and particularly when it comes to international human rights law and international humanitarian law, regardless where these breaches occur, we will call them out. Sudan, Gaza, Myanmar, Ukraine. And there are, sadly, many other conflicts where these breaches occur, and we will continue to call them out.
Christian, I see that you have something to add on Sudan, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alessandra. And I think it's thank you, Jeremy, for taking the lead on this on another very important crisis. And so let me add a few points here, as they have been indeed very important and very much not too much in the media, like Boris has just pointed out. All Sudan's 18 states are reporting cholera cases. Over 100,000 cases and more than 2,740 deaths have been reported since July 2024. So that's in the last year. 62% of all cases and 55% of all deaths, so that's much more than half, are from Khartoum, from Jazeera, Gedaref, and White Nile states. 12% of cases are in children under 5, and 10% of deaths are also in children under 5. Since the reports of the first case in South Darfur on 29 May this year, 2025, the disease has now spread to 28 localities across all the 5 Darfur states. Efforts are underway to urgently launch a cholera vaccination campaign in priority localities in South Darfur. Cholera has spread to 22 localities across the 3 Kordofan states, with again more than 9,000 cases and up to 500 deaths having been reported. And just a reminder, cholera is an ancient disease, easy to treat. It would not have to be around. El Fasher in Darfur state is suffering a severe humanitarian and public health crisis driven by, of course, the active conflict, blockade, and mass displacement. Civilians in and around the city, including Abu Shuk, the IDP camp there, face severe food shortages, rising malnutrition deaths, and severely limited access to healthcare. The large cholera outbreak is ongoing across Darfur state and has hit communities and displacement sites, adding pressure to already fragile services. Access to healthcare across Sudan continues to be severely constrained due to the insecurity, the attacks on healthcare, shortage on medicines and medical supplies, and shortage of health personnel and cash to cover health facilities' operational costs. 38% of all health facilities are non-functional and 62% are partially functioning. Child vaccination rates have declined from over 90% at the end of 2022 to 48% as of now. The disruption of childhood vaccinations, disease surveillance, and vector control, coupled with the access issues that we have and the natural disasters, has created conditions for the spread of disease outbreaks, namely, of course, cholera. Acute malnutrition is also ongoing and surging. Between 1 January and 31 July, so the first big half of the year, nearly 20,000 children have been admitted to stabilization centers for the treatment of severe acute malnutrition with medical complications. WHO is supporting 142 nutrition stabilization centers in this year for the management of severely acute malnourished children with medical complications. Attacks on healthcare continue to mark the conflict in Sudan. Since 15 April 2023, so in the last, 2.5 years, WHO has verified 177 attacks on healthcare, which led to over 1,000 deaths and injuries. Gender-based violence has dramatically increased. We have seen reports on this all over. 12 million people, a quarter of the population, are at risk. According to UNFPA, this is a 200% increase in just 1 year. WHO currently supports 60 primary healthcare centers and 142 nutrition stabilization centers. WHO also delivered 488 metric tons of medical supplies in 2025 and reached over 12 million people with oral cholera vaccines since 19 August 2024, last year, this time. Thank you.
Christian, thank you very much for this further information on the situation, really dire situation in Sudan. I'll ask the question again if there's any question that you would like to ask, whether it's OHCHR or WHO. Okay. Sorry. I see Olga from UNHCR, Olga Serrado. She also might have something to add on the situation in Sudan. Olga, I give you the floor.
Just very quickly, and to complement as well what Christine was saying on cholera, I think it was about a week and a half or a couple of weeks ago that we could confirm that cholera had spread now to Eastern Chad. So at that time when our colleagues briefed, there was only one of the refugee camps that was impacted and had confirmed cases. Now there is a cumulative number of 735 cases with 50 deaths already, more than half among the refugee population. And now the outbreak is spreading rapidly, is affecting already 6 refugee camps, with Farchana being the latest camp that is affected. And there is a high case fatality rate, which indicates that containing the spread of the disease is going to be difficult. And it's likely that it will spread further because, as we highlighted, I mean, mainly due to the funding cuts and the situation, we are the number of water that is being delivered to refugees is much lower than the emergency standards. There is only 1 doctor per 50,000 refugees in Eastern Chad, and also the hygiene and shelter capacity is overcrowded. So I just wanted to add that to what Christian was mentioning on cholera and give an update on the situation. Over to you, Alessandra.
Yes, Olga, thank you very much for this. Thanks for complimenting. I still see no question. If this is the case, let's go to your second point, Jeremy, about Myanmar. Thank you.
Yes, again, thanks. As we near the passing of another year with no justice for the violence which started on the 25th of August 2017 in Myanmar, we are left to ask the question of when the enduring misery for these and ongoing crimes will end, particularly for the long-suffering Rohingya community. Ending impunity and ensuring the Rohingyas' rights to security, citizenship, and equality are essential for breaking the cycle of violence. Since November 2023, the human rights and humanitarian situation in Rakhine have sharply deteriorated, further deepening the already life-threatening conditions faced by the Rohingya. Both the military and the Arakan army have committed and continue to commit serious atrocity crimes against the Rohingya with impunity, in flagrant violation of international law, including the provisional measures ordered by the International Court of Justice. Amidst a global funding crisis, Rohingya in both Myanmar and Bangladesh are enduring dire conditions compounded by drastic cuts to food assistance. We implore the international community to step up support for the Rohingya by increasing humanitarian funding to secure access to basic needs and essential services, to resolutely support international accountability processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for this point. I see no questions. See no questions also on the line. So thanks again. And now let's go back to the situation of hunger in Gaza. As you can see from the, I'm just going there, sorry, from the IPC info.org website, the Integrated Food Security Phase classification has been publishing just now. They've gone live with the report on the Gaza Strip. And the colleagues, the IPC analysts say famine confirmed in Gaza governorate. Sorry. Start again. Famine confirmed in Gaza governorate and projected to expand. To speak more about this, we have with us today Martin Bauer from the World Food Program. Martin, I see you are connected. You are the Director of Food Security and Nutrition Analysis at WFP. And we also have with us Dr. Rick Papercorn, who, as you know, is the WHO representative in the occupied Palestinian territory. And you, Rick, are connecting from Gaza. And then we also have Jeremy, who will have some comments on behalf of the Office of the Human Rights. So officially, because I'm receiving, while I'm talking, I'm receiving tons of messages from your colleagues. The embargo has now been lifted. It's 11 o'clock. We can, you can report on that as you have already started doing it. But I really like to thank our colleagues that are here to give you more information about what you have read. So I'll ask now maybe to Jean-Martin to start, as you may tell us a little bit more about the situation on hunger, and then we'll go to Rick and to Jeremy. Jean-Martin.
Thank you. In today's release, the IPC confirms that famine is no longer a risk in Gaza City. It's a reality. The IPC, it's the most consensus-based, rigorous assessment we have in the humanitarian sector, and it tells us that unless immediate steps are taken, lives will be lost at large scale. When a famine is declared, it means that there's widespread starvation, widespread illness, and widespread mortality. The IPC classification of famine only happens when 3 thresholds are met: extreme food deprivation, acute malnutrition, and starvation-related deaths. And all 3 have now been breached in Gaza City. And as you mentioned, these conditions are forecast to spread to Deir el-Balah and Khan Yunis before the end of September. Now, the findings we have show that in Gaza City, the number of people facing extreme food consumption deficits, that tripled between May and July, breaching famine thresholds. The malnutrition rates in Gaza City have also tripled between May and July. And the assessment of the experts, the independent experts, is that mortality also exceeded famine thresholds. We're very worried about the malnutrition among children, which is accelerating. We're seeing geometric increases in malnutrition rates. What we need to know is that a famine requires more than the usual response. Famine is a tipping point, and with the increase in malnutrition, we need much more skilled medical practitioners in Gaza to treat malnutrition and its impacts on children. So what we're witnessing right now is the most severe deterioration since the IPC began analyzing Gaza, and we're at this point in the 5th formal famine declaration in the entire IPC's history. The IPC was created more than 20 years ago. And in that time, there's been a famine confirmed, first in Somalia in 2011, South Sudan in 2017, South Sudan again in 2020, Sudan in 2024, and now in Gaza. So for the first time, we have 2 famines taking place at the same time. For the first time, we have a famine in the Middle East. And this all shows how unique the situation is in Gaza City with the breach of these thresholds. So this demands a response on a scale and urgency we haven't seen before. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Martin. That's really very, very strong information that you're giving us. So Rick, now you are in Gaza at the moment, so not only you can see with your eyes what's happening, but maybe you can also comment on the IPC report, please.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Good morning to all. Greetings from Deir el-Balah. Yeah, let me start, of course, with everything related to the IPC report, and then I will focus specifically on some other health and related health topic. So first of all, I mean, famine confirmed in Gaza Governorate, we know that. And according to the new integrated food security classification analysis released today, it is actually staggering that this famine, the so-called IPC phase 5, is confirmed in Gaza Governorate, with over 500,000 facing catastrophic conditions characterized by starvation, destitution, and death. So, as was reported, this marks the first time a famine has been officially confirmed in the Middle East region. Between mid-August and the end of September 2025, conditions are expected to further worsen, with famine even projected in the areas where I am now, Deir al-Balah and Khan Yunis. Acute malnutrition is projected to continue worsening rapidly. In July alone, the nutrition cluster reported that more than 12,000 children were identified as acutely malnourished. It was the highest monthly figure ever recorded and a six-fold increase since the start of the year. Nearly 1 in 4 of these 12,000 children were suffering from severe acute malnutrition, the deadliest form with both short and long-term impacts. In 2025 alone, 206 people have died due to the effects of malnutrition, as verified by WHO. And also, nearly 55,500 malnourished, pregnant and breastfeeding women will require urgent nutrition. I want to remind, we have said this before, that before this crisis exploded, there was no malnutrition in Gaza. We talked about 0.6%. There was no malnutrition about lactating women. So this report, IPC report, only confirms the alarm I think the UN has been ringing for a long time. I think we've consistently reported on how during the visits to Gaza, my colleagues, my teams, including myself, witnessed people starving, bodies frail, that you witnessed children who were 5 years old and they looked like 2 years old children, visibly malnourished, and health workers as well, health workers weak and exhausted. And this is the human face of a collapsing health, nutrition, and water and a sanitation system. Hunger and malnutrition are not only about empty stomachs. It weakens bodies, fuels disease, cripples health systems, and robs children of their future. The situation will certainly get worse quickly as famine stalks other parts of the Gaza Strips too. So we should not forget, this is a man-made crisis. So it must and can be reversed. The time for action is now, without delay nor excuses. To enable live humanitarian operations, we need an immediate and sustained ceasefire, release all the hostages, and unimpeded access for a mass influx of assistance to reach people across Gaza. We need greater amounts of diverse and nutritious food aid, along with dramatically improved delivery and distribution and accessibility, as well as shelter, fuel, cooking gas, and food production inputs. We need protection of healthcare and access to support rehabilitation of the health system, maintenance and revival of essential health services, including primary healthcare. We need the restoration of commercial flows at scales, market systems, essential service, and local food production, which is also vital if the worst outcomes of the famine are to be avoided. UNICEF and WHO, we are working to scale up the entry of life-saving nutrition supplies, including therapeutic food and infant formula. Current stocks in Gaza can only meet the needs of a very limited number of children, a few thousand, less than a month. Hospitals, my second point. The hospitals currently, remaining partially functioning hospitals, minimal function hospitals, are under immense pressure in Gaza City. Actually all over, especially in Gaza City. Ongoing evacuation orders in part of Gaza City, combined with the massively escalating violence, have forced people into even smaller areas, piling unbearable pressures into hospital. Al-Shifa and Al-Ahli Hospital, they're operating at nearly 300% overcapacity, with a constant influx of complex trauma injuries. Last Tuesday, I was in Gaza City, and we were collecting the patients for a medevac on Wednesday. We also assessed Shifa Hospital discussions with the staff. Now, I was there also 6 weeks ago when already Shifa Hospital had turned into there was an enormous increase in trauma patients, but now it's incredible. There's trauma patients literally everywhere. In the corridors, even on the stairs, in newly opened department like a mother and child, an obs and gynae department, etc. Trauma patients everywhere. The same applies for Al-Ahli and also in Khan Yunis Nasser Medical Complex. All of them operate on 250 or 300% capacity. We're also deeply concerned about currently now on Al-Ahli and patient-friendly hospital in the north because they lie close to the evacuation zone and the risk of becoming non-functional if not protected. And we have gone through this many times already in this horrific crisis. So what is the impact of an intensified Gaza City offensive, a military incursion, and further mass displacement? Every pillar of life in Gaza is being torn apart. Food, water, healthcare, sanitation, dignity. Nothing is spared. So as WHO, we warned that the plan to intensify military operations, military incursion, however you call it, in Gaza City will have a horrific humanitarian impact on people and the near collapse health system. We will witness many more civilians killed and injured in an environment of malnutrition, and I would say general exhaustion from all. Also, together with all partners, the UN, WHO, we've poured immense effort into reviving what remains of Gaza's shattered health system. Yet every surge in violence pushes it closer to collapse, crossing red lines that must never be crossed. This must end. WHO will stay in Gaza City and deliver where people are. The UN will not be part of any forced displacement of people to the south. We want to remind the parties to the conflict of their obligation under international law to protect civilians, including humanitarian workers, and those who cannot or choose not to move, and to safeguard humanitarian facilities and other civilian infrastructure. My last part is on European Gaza Hospital, which is located East Khan Yunis, just east of the Saladin Road. So on 16 August, WHO and partners visited the European Gaza Hospital, while numerous previous attempts to access the facilities have been denied. Maybe you remember there was already, I think a couple of months ago, WHO organized a medevac from European Gaza Hospital. That hospital was attacked. Then we could carry out a medevac. We evacuated the patients, the staff, etc. Since then, the hospital had been non-functional. But we assessed that the roads are severely damaged and possibly impossible for trucks and ambulances. Areas outside the hospital premises are heavily damaged, particularly outside of the emergency department and the outpatients department. The infrastructure is damaged, especially in the prefabricated extension and some ancillary buildings. And the initial findings suggest it may take up to 3 months to resume if we talk about secondary care services, not primary care services. Alexandra, I want to stop here. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rick. Sorry, we are trying to, at the same time, do 20 things. Just wanted to inform you that the statement of the Secretary General on this terrible announcement of this morning is now out, is in your mail boxes. And the Secretary General is saying, just when it seems there are no words left to describe the living hell in Gaza, a new one has been added: famine. This is not a mystery, it is a man-made disaster, a moral indictment, and a failure of humanity itself. Famine is not only about food, it is the deliberate the deliberate collapse of the systems needed for human survival. People are starving, says the Secretary General. Children are dying, and those with the duty to act are failing. As the occupying power, Israel has unequivocal obligations under international law, including the duty of ensuring food and medical supplies of the population. We cannot allow this situation to continue with impunity, says the Secretary General. And he concludes by saying no more excuses. The time for action is not tomorrow, it is now. We need an immediate ceasefire, the immediate release of all hostages, and full unfettered humanitarian access. You have it in your email boxes. It has been published on the social media accounts. We'll finish this part of the briefing with Jeremy, who also has a comment on behalf of the OHCHR, and then I will open the floor to questions. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yes, thank you. You should have all received the statement issued by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk. It was issued a short time ago. In it, he says, "The famine declared today in Gaza Governorate by the IPC is the direct result of actions taken by the Israeli government. It has unlawfully restricted the entry and distribution of humanitarian assistance and other goods necessary for the survival of the civilian population in the Gaza Strip. We have already seen deaths from starvation and malnutrition across the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military has destroyed critical civilian infrastructure, almost all agricultural land, banned fishing, and forcibly displaced the population, all drivers of this famine. It is a war crime to use starvation as a method of warfare, and the resulting deaths may also amount to the war crime of willful killing. The Israeli authorities must take immediate steps to end the famine in the Gaza Governorate and prevent further loss of life across the Gaza Strip. They must ensure immediate entry of humanitarian assistance in sufficient amounts and full access to UN and other humanitarian organisations."
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And more reactions on the IPC report is coming now from our colleague in UNRWA, and I've been asked to read this to you. This is the statement by Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, who has just published a post where he says, "Months of warnings have fallen on the deaf ears. Famine is now confirmed in Gaza City. This is starvation by design and man-made by the government of Israel. It is the direct result of banning food and other basic supplies for months, including from UNRWA. The spread of famine can still be controlled by a ceasefire and allowing humanitarian organizations to do their work and reach starving people with aid." And he concludes by saying, "Time for political will." And you also have the possibility of reading this post on CG Lazzarini's X account, sorry. So we now go to the questions. I see already quite a few hands online, but let me start with the room. Robin, AFP.
Following this declaration, we might well now see countries rushing to do airdrops to show that they are doing something about the situation. Is that enough? To what extent is that useful or even dangerous compared to delivering aid by land?
Thank you very much. I don't know who would like to take this on. Maybe Jean-Martin. I start with Jean-Martin Bauer. Jean-Martin, Robin is our AFP correspondent.
I'd really like to focus on the situation in Gaza and how serious it is according to the findings that we have. Airdrops are a solution that's not going to resolve this problem. What we have is a famine taking place. We need to make sure that we address a famine in the way it needs to be addressed, and that means looking at the malnutrition rates, looking at supporting the systems on the ground. When you move from a food crisis to an outright famine, there's a step change that occurs. We need to think about a response that meaningfully addresses the needs of the most vulnerable, and that's the needs of little children. I'd like to perhaps pass it on to my colleagues in Gaza.
Rick, would you like to also answer this question, please?
Yeah, I think we've gone through this before. And we shouldn't forget, we are almost 2 years in this horrific crisis. And I think having been also part of that as a WHO rep, we've seen this constant, it's almost like a squeezing, a strangling of the Gaza and its population, and then a little bit of a release, and then again, a strangling, etc., etc. We have seen these cycles. We've also seen airdrops in the past. I think it's all well intended, so I don't want to, belittle it, etc. And in extreme emergencies, and if people cannot be reached in any other way, they potentially can be useful, but not in that sense in Gaza. There's a system in place. We have proven as the UN and its partners, even before, during this whole crisis, and specifically when there was this temporary ceasefire, that when actually humanitarian assistance is even a little bit facilitated, it has never been properly facilitated all along, that people are reached. They are reached in a way more cost-effective way than these airdrops. And it would be good for somebody to make an analysis about the cost of the airdrops during this crisis, including now. And then, for example, the humanitarian community here, we are struggling to get a sustained flow of fuel, just to mention one thing. We probably could have a sustained flow of fuel for the coming year to come, etc., when you offset it against the cost, against these airdrops. So these airdrops are definitely in the Gaza situation extremely cost ineffective. They're occasionally dangerous. People have been killed. We also have seen, at least I've seen it in my own eyes with the former airdrops, I didn't see it this time, that sometimes medical supplies are included, which can be very dangerous because they are just dropping everywhere, and they are not like collected or somewhere and then they go to an hospital, etc. I remember in this first range of airdrops, we even saw some sachets with morphine we identified. So in short, well intended, not needed in Gaza. There's a system there, there's a system in place, and I really would back, invest those funds in a proper humanitarian approach, etc. UN and partners are very much ready for that. Over to you.
Absolutely. As we heard this morning from Tom Fletcher, we are ready to go, and we should let be in at this point in time and very strongly. I'll go now to Emma Farge, our correspondent of Reuters.
Good morning. Question for WFP and for WHO. I'm wondering whether the first steps in the Gaza City military operation are already making aid flows more difficult, either into Gaza or within Gaza. Are there extra impediments because of this campaign? And for Dr. Pieperkorn, please, I'm wondering how famine is affecting other patients, trauma patients in hospitals who will need a certain amount of calories to recover. Can you tell me how other patients are being affected by starvation? Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, Jean-Martin, you want to start with the first question?
Okay. What we've seen in the past few weeks in Gaza City has been an exponential increase in child malnutrition and acute malnutrition. This is a very worrying situation, and it's one of the reasons why we're now talking about a famine in Gaza City. The data is there and shows how urgent it is to devote specific attention to the children in Gaza City. And the worry is that along this path, the numbers could get worse. I told you that the acute malnutrition in Gaza City has tripled since May, between May and July. And because it is a geometric increase, we could have a doubling very quickly. This needs to end right now because of its very real impacts on many children in that part of the Gaza Strip.
Thank you. Enrique, maybe on the second question?
Yeah, let me add, and also a little bit on the first one. So what we of course see happening in the north of Gaza, and this increased hostilities which are already going on, and then I think I would say almost the mass casualties incidents surrounding any food distribution. We see this huge increase in trauma and trauma patients, and what I reported on, and just to give some figures, situations escalate sharply in July with daily fatalities of an averaging 119, so nearly double the average recorded in May. So as if we were back in the first 6 to 8 months of this conflict. Injuries also surged dramatically with nearly 14,000 in July compared to 6,000 in May, and a reflection of that you see in we see actually in this we see that in all the hospitals, this completely that all those hospitals have become massive trauma wards. I just want to say something about malnutrition, because we get this question as well. So how do we then support malnutrition? And then we'll address the question how it impacts. So as we all know, that malnutrition can be a direct cause of death or a contributing factor, and that often weakens the immune system, making the body more vulnerable to infectious and other diseases. And as such, malnutrition may be the primary cause of death or be a cofactor, and increases the risk of mortality and conditions. So we are supporting actually the hospitals, the Ministry of Health, in verifying malnutrition-related deaths and using agreed technical guidelines. Special committees are formed at each hospital. This committee review all non-trauma deaths from the previous 24 hours and check if malnutrition may have been a factor. And to do this, they assess such as the MITS, upper arm circumference, weight for height, etc., body mass index, etc., and any recent signs of severe weight loss and other diseases, underlying conditions. And the criteria are adapted for each age group. So, and the death report from WHO or by the Nutrition Stabilization Center also reviewed together with those committees on the same criteria. Now, the question, so why do I want to be clear on this one? Of course, the generalized malnutrition, which you see everywhere, impacts everything. So we see, for example, and having witnessed so many trauma patients and talking to the medical specialists and surgeons, etc., recovery takes way more time for every patient, and people don't recover. Recovery from wound infections, etc., takes way more time. All of those things are related to the, I would say, to the almost generalized malnourished state of so many people in Gaza. And I think it's, and you see that in the IPC report, rightly so, there's always a focus on under five children, because they are the vulnerable group, small children. But the IPC report, and we've pointed this out as well many times, also points out they are deeply concerned about, let's say, the older children, adolescents, and the elderly. Not just trauma-related, let's say, injuries that people recover, the recovery time takes way longer or it doesn't happen, but also elderly and other people suffering from non-communicable diseases, etc. So if you are in a better, we all know, a better physical state, and at least well-nourished, etc., the whole, even your medication, etc., makes a much better impact. So yeah, it's a huge impact on every health-related condition. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Rick, and thanks to Jean-Martin. I'll go now to Gabriela Sotomayor, our correspondent of Proceso.
Thank you, Alessandra. Two questions, if may I. So this is a famine that has been predicted for a long time. Why are you announcing it now? What's changed? And the second question regarding accountability. I like to ask you, it's obvious that Mr. Netanyahu is responsible, but so are the complicit governments that have supported him. Is that correct? You more than anyone are witnessed of what is happening. So can you indict Mr. Netanyahu in an international court? Do you recommend a court like others established in the past, like the International Criminal Court of Rwanda, for example? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriela. So I'll ask maybe Jean-Martin to answer your first question. I think he did actually explain, but maybe you want to reiterate this for our journalists. And Jeremy will take your second question. Jean-Martin.
Absolutely. What I'd like to emphasize here is that there have been many warnings of a risk of famine in Gaza from the IPC and the Famine Review Committee. Those warnings began in late 2023, and the last time we were here together to discuss the IPC process for Gaza, it was on July 29th when there was an alert issued. So there have been many, many warnings along the way. I need to emphasize that the IPC is a 21 agency partnership. It includes intergovernmental organizations, UN agencies, NGOs. It's a very robust process that has been ringing the alarm. So the question is, why now? Well, as the last time we spoke in July 29th was the moment when in Gaza City we saw indicators breach famine thresholds. That has been the case for food consumption. It's been the case for malnutrition. And what's happened since is that the experts have worked on the data for the entire Gaza Strip. They've looked at updated information, also in the case of mortality, and that allowed a famine determination to be made and confirmed by the Famine Review Committee. So this is a process that's very meticulous, it's very precise, and that reached its conclusion just a few days ago. And this is why we're coming out today with this confirmation of a famine in Gaza City.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Yes, thanks, Gabriela. There are two ways, two parts to this question. First and foremost, as the High Commissioner said, it is Israel's responsibility to open the borders and to ensure aid flows in at massive levels immediately. As he says, it's a war crime to use starvation as a method of warfare, and the resulting deaths may amount to the war crime of willful killing. I'd also like to point out on, with respect to third parties, because I think you raise an interesting point, and it goes to what the other journalists raised earlier. And when we talk about international humanitarian law, which is, and specifically the Geneva Conventions, which are the cornerstone of international humanitarian law. And it states, Article 1 of the Geneva Convention states that all contracting parties must undertake to respect and ensure respect for the convention in all circumstances. All states have an obligation to prevent a violation that may be committed. The greater the degree of influence, the more measures a state is obligated to take. It's quite clear.
It is quite clear, and also refer to the statement of the Secretary General, Gabriela. Oh, I see you have a follow-up. Then I'll go to ARD and FA.
Thank you very much. So the cruelty of this punishment, I am not a doctor, but how long a person has to suffer from hunger to die? I mean, how many days? The cruelty is it's really, I don't know how to describe in English, but it's beyond measure. can you say something about this process of a person to die without food and water?
Yeah, maybe I will ask Rick to take this one.
Yeah, I find it a difficult question, and also, you know, maybe I don't want to go into this discussion of cruelty and everything related to that. It should just simply not happen. And I think, as has been mentioned, we're talking about a man-made malnutrition crisis. And I think so men can also fix this. I also want to stress it's very difficult because, I think I just referred to that earlier, that malnutrition can be a direct cause of death or contributing factor. And it often directly, of course, weakens the immune system and it makes the body more vulnerable to infections and other diseases. We see this incredible poor water sanitation conditions all over Gaza, and already from the start of the crisis, and vastly deteriorating, which are all cofactors. So it's sometimes difficult to also say, is this malnutrition the primary cause, or is it definitely a cofactor? So we, in short term, in days or weeks, we see weight loss and muscle wasting, fatigue, weakened immunity, etc. What I said, and then we get when it takes a little longer, you just talk about micronutrient deficiencies, which cause anemia, poor wound healing, which I already referred to, which is every time you go to these trauma wards, etc., the doctors there and nurses, etc., tell me that something like how incredibly long term, and then with all the risks of this multiple and this multi-drug resistance, of course, which is increasing as well, and higher risk of infection of anything, and on the long term. And that is, I think, we even don't think about enough that when you talk about long-term stunting, and for children you can talk about organ damage and delayed development, and of course in severe cases also death. For young children, can happen very quickly, as we know, in a few days without and weeks without adequate feeding because they have a high nutrient needs, etc. Adults, especially elderly, etc., the visible signs can take longer, but I think it's not for nothing that also the IPC report points out, hey, this is so generalized, and yeah, we focus on children under 5 as a special vulnerable groups. But please also take care of the older children and the elderly. And I see, by the way, also around me and even among my own teams and staff, etc. In general, there's much more of almost a lethargy. People not only are exhausted, etc., but hardly anyone gets proper, diverse food. And that is even for the ones, humanitarian workers we work with. So let me leave it here. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Rick. We feel despair. Let me go to ARD, Tobias Haller.
Yes, thank you. I am asking the question. I'm Mara Probst. I'm also from the ARD German TV and Radio. I'm asking the question for Mr. Haller.
Please.
Thank you. I have a question also for the WFP or the WHO, which we've heard it before that there are certain factors that led to the declaration, and we heard that it was mortality was one of the factors. Could you please elaborate again, maybe, or emphasize on which factors you kind of based this declaration and what made it phase 5? What were the essential factors? And also, what will be the direct consequences of this declaration? What will be the consequences for Israel? What will have to be done? And also, whether this phase 5 is set for all of Gaza, so like 100% of the population, or how much percent of the population is affected? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I think Jean-Martin had spoken about that, but I'll give him the floor again, maybe to just underline these few points. And Rick, if you want to add something afterwards.
Okay, well, look, what this new IPC analysis tells us is that there is a famine in Gaza City, but IPC 5 conditions also cover other areas. And there's a distinction between famine and IPC 5. Let me explain that quickly. The IPC is a 5-point scale. Phase 1 is a normal, 2 is stress, 3 is emergency. 3 is crisis, 4 is emergency, and 5 is a catastrophe. When you've got enough people in phase 5 and there's a review by the FRC, then that can be confirmed as a famine. So phase 5 and famine are two things that are related but not exactly the same. So what we say in this release that came out just recently is that there is a famine that's confirmed in Gaza City, but the phase 5 conditions are now affecting 500,000 people and up to 630,000 in between now and the end of September. Now, in terms of mortality, what the report says is that, and this was looked at by the FRC, who include experts in the areas of food security, nutrition, and the study of mortality. They tell us that mortality is usually underreported in Gaza, especially for non-trauma deaths. And that's because of the breakdown of the information systems in place. So the health systems is now experiencing a surge in illness and things like multi-drug resistant infections. That makes treatable injuries increasingly fatal. Newborns face elevated mortality risks as well because there's been a collapse in neonatal intensive care. And there's a convergence of widespread malnutrition, illness, and collapsing health systems, deteriorating wash conditions. Water and sanitation is very problematic, and increase in child diseases, in addition to a very worrying increase in acute malnutrition. All that led to the consideration that governor at Gaza City reached a famine level mortality.
Rick, you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think Jean-Martin, raised all, and I think it's, and you can find this, by the way, in the IPC report. So, I mean, for classifying famine, it means that that's the most extreme category, and it's triggered when 3 critical thresholds are met. So extreme food deprivation, acute malnutrition, and starvation-related deaths, and they have been breached. And the latest analysis now affirms, on the basis of reasonable evidence, that these criteria have been met. I mean, like for the Gaza governorate, and maybe to add there, because you asked a bit. So you talked about 500,000 people facing catastrophic conditions characterized by starvation, destitution, and death. But another over 1 million people, 54% of the entire population, are facing emergency IPC phase 4. And close to 400,000 people, 20%, are in crisis, what is called IPC 3. And maybe to say one more thing, if nothing would be done now, and the report also is clear on that, then it's projected, not just if you look at acute malnutrition of children, which is that really exponentially increasing, but it's also over the longer term, if very little happens, that it's projected that through June 26, part of the report, at least 132,000 children under the age of 5 are at risk of death from acute malnutrition, according to this IPC analysis. And also this number has doubled compared to the IPC estimates reported in May 25. Over to you.
Thank you, Rick. And this figure are really appalling. And so let me go to the last questions from Isabel Sacco, the Spanish news agency.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. I there is already a reaction by Israel to the report. And I would like to read to the representative of IPC what Israel says, denying all the main result of the report about famine. So Israel says, the IPC twisted its own rules and ignored its own criteria just to produce false accusations against Israel. The IPC changed its own global standard, cutting to 30% threshold to 15 for this report only, and totally ignoring its second criteria of death rate, solely to serve Hamas fake campaign. Thank you for your response.
Maybe, Jean-Martin, I think you had spoken about some of the criteria. Maybe you want to answer our journalist.
Sure. So what I'd like to say is that, again, the IPC is the gold standard for food security analysis worldwide. The indicators we used in Gaza that the IPC used, and I'm not the IPC representative, I'm the WFP Director of Food Security Analysis, but the indicators that the IPC used for this analysis have been used in other countries. I told you earlier on that there have been famine determinations in the past in Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan. We used the nutrition measure used in Gaza in the past as well. I think what I've heard as an objection is that we used the mid-upper arm circumference as a measure for malnutrition instead of weight for height. That's something that is allowed for in the IPC protocol and has been allowed for by the IPC manual since 2019. And this measure that we used in Gaza for the determination was also used in past famine declarations in South Sudan and in Sudan. So the protocols have been applied in the case of Gaza. And I remind you that the IPC also has a strong governance mechanism that includes a famine review committee with the foremost experts in food security and nutrition and mortality that looked at the data. And we can take this finding as seriously because this is the gold standard in food security analysis worldwide.
Thank you very much, Martin. I see Rick wants to add something.
Well, it's difficult to add something. I think Jean-Martin has been very clear, not just the gold standard, but it's also a very well established global system. So I think it should be taken seriously, very, very seriously. And it's factual. I also want to remind that everyone who's working here on the ground, and anyone, for us, WHO, I heard it from my UNICEF colleagues and many other NGOs and colleagues, etc. We see this happening on the ground, and we have been warning constantly on this. So is it a surprise for us? No, it's not a surprise. And this is so, I mean, like overwhelming when you see this, not just in the hospitals, etc., within the communities, etc. I also want to make the point that we have had previous debates on, on mortality rates and the number of people killed and injured, etc. And like we have raised before, I think every one of us tries to be as factual and analytical as possible. And I'm afraid we're talking about underestimation in many of these topics. So maybe that's all what I want to add to this.
Yeah, indeed. And Jeremy, you want to also add?
Yeah, I'd just like to add one thing, well, a couple of things actually with respect to this, and just echoing what my colleague's saying there. The first is we are witnessing people starving to death already, beyond what this report is saying. That is beyond doubt. The second thing is this: we have been talking about flagging warning about this nightmare scenario, which is going to present itself through the declaration of famine. Now, so now we're at the stage where this nightmare scenario is reality. It's horrible, cruel, unforgivable, reality, what's happening on the ground, as stated in the declaration. And the other thing is, I just reflect on the fact we've talked about our office on the stain of a stain on humanity when it comes to events that have been unfolding in Gaza. Maybe today we need to reflect on the fact that inhumanity, our collective inhumanity.
Maybe,
Yeah, and
Alexandra,
yeah,
can I maybe add,
sure, Rick.
add one thing? You know, also the IPC over the years, etc. What I understand, it is definitely not the IPC experts. I'm not speaking, but it's not just the UN. It's 21 organizations, including respected NGOs, with long experience in dealing with hunger, malnutrition, and its effects. Yeah, and this kind of questioning and arguing about the reports, it makes me incredibly sad. I mean, like, we got to do something about that. You know, please, can we please do something about this? Can we please, I mean, like, make sure that this is reversed and this never happens again? Can we please work on that? I think these petty discussions about arguments, about data, etc. There's a massive disaster going on. We can all witness it. We can all see it. Can we please help solve this? Thank you.
Absolutely. This is indeed a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportion. And as we've been saying the whole morning, famine must be stopped at all costs. And this is a race against time. To end this terrible situation with an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian response at a very large scale, unimpeded, that will save a life. Gabriela, sorry, let me go to Christian, because she's not asked any question. Then if we have time, I'll go back to you. Christian Rick is our correspondent of the German news agency.
Thank you, Alexandra. And I'm sorry, Rick, I totally agree with you, but because this information is out there, we do have to follow it and verify what the facts are. We report all the time that there's this 30% threshold on, let me just read it properly, on children that suffer from malnutrition, and the Israelis are saying in this particular report, it's only 15%. I haven't found that immediately, but to refute that claim, it would be good to have a confirmation that no, the three criteria, 20% of households, 30% of children, and so many people dying per 10,000. It would be great to have a confirmation that all three, including the 30% of children with malnutrition, could be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean-Martin?
Thank you, Christian. I'd like to help with that. There are different ways of measuring malnutrition. One of them is weight for height. And that's when, if measured by weight for height, so that's you measure how tall the child is and you weigh the child. When you get 30% above the malnutrition as assessed by weight for height, that's where you're in famine territory. Now, the IPC manual also provides for using MUAC, which is mid-upper arm circumference. You measure the upper arm of the child with a tape. Both are acceptable measures, but they're very different measures. And the equivalent to 30% in weight for height is 15% by MUAC. That's been established, again, by the nutrition community, by the experts who are part of the IPC and even outside the IPC. What happened in Gaza City is that the threshold of 15% MUAC, mid-upper arm circumference, has been exceeded. The incidence of acute malnutrition by the MUAC in Gaza City has tripled between May and July. The use of the MUAC as a measure for the IPC has been accepted for years now and has been used in past famine confirmations as well. So I hope that reassures you. All that information, it's very technical, is available online if you want to double check as well. We're also happy to take further questions if we want to get into the details of that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, as one of our colleagues here is saying, I mean, that would be a simple solution to verify all this, Christian, that would be to let international media in to verify and to see by themselves. But I think Jean-Martin has been giving you the scientific answer, and I thank him very much for this. Rick, I see your hand moving. Is that you want to
sorry.
add? No,
nothing
okay.
to add.
No worries. Thank you. It's hard to see from here. Gabriela, very last question, also on Gaza, I understand.
Yes, thank you so much, Alessandra. My question is, was oxycodone a drug found in flour bags distributed by Israel in 8 centers? And if it's true, because I was on vacation, I don't know if you already talked about this, but I understand that oxycodone drug, it's a serious thing. I don't know what are the main effects of this drug, if you have any evidence on that. Thank you so much.
Rick.
Yeah, I think we heard the rumors. I wouldn't know at all. There's no confirmation of that at all. So that's all what I can say. We don't know.
Thank you. That is very clear. So I'd like to thank all the colleagues who have been speaking this morning on this. Let me remind you a couple of things. First of all, that you have the information on the complete information on the IPC website. We also have several agencies that have spoken this morning and others, so FAO, UNICEF, of course, World Food Programme, and WHO, who have published a joint press release that you find on any of their websites, where they say, in addition, of course, as we said, to confirm the famine for the first time in Gaza, they reiterate the call for immediate ceasefire and unhindered humanitarian access to curb deaths from hunger and malnutrition. So you have this also on these websites. You have also the statement from the Secretary General in your mailbox and by the Commissioner General Lazzarini on his social media. And I see in the chat and in my message on WhatsApp that you're all asking for the notes of Tom Fletcher from this morning. Jens tells me it's coming, but you can already see the video on the UNOG multimedia room. And it may be that in the meantime, yeah, I think it's arrived. Ocha just sent it out. So you have now also the remarks on Gaza that Tom Fletcher gave this morning at the press briefing. And I'd like to thank really everyone. Rick, please, stay safe in Gaza. And we really are happy that you connected this morning. Good luck with your very important work. Thank you very much to Jean-Martin Bauer to connect from Rome. That was really insightful. And thanks to Jeremy for the human rights approach. I have just one last information for you that comes from the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is concluding this morning the review of the report of Finland. And next week, they will complete their meeting by issuing the observation on the 4 countries that they have reviewed, which are, in addition to Finland, also the PRK, Kiribati, and the Maldives. So if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank you very much for having followed this long but extremely important briefing. Thanks again to all our speakers, and I wish you a very good weekend. Thank you.